welcome back to the If I Knew You Better podcast. My name is Brendan Davis, which you probably know if you discovered the podcast, because my name is right there on the label. And today, I am happy to roll out the first of a new series on If I Knew You Better. I have my normal shows where I do a deep dive interview with somebody and sort of learn about their trajectory, their history, lessons learned, relatable things they can share, etc. We'll do a little bit of that today in the course of the conversation, but this new focus is motivated because of the situation we're dealing with as far as the pandemic goes, and I don't want it to be all COVID-19 all the time moving forward, but today we're going to get into it because we're in the first few days of the mandatory stay-at-home, damn you, stay at home order from the state of California. And frankly, I think it's a great idea. So anyway, without further ado from me, let me introduce my guest. My guest is an old friend of mine. How long is a subject that we often stop and do the math, but let's say about 25 years. Ben Rock, welcome to the podcast.
I'm so excited to be here.
Oh.
I wish under better circumstances, it's always good to talk to you, though.
Thank you very much. It's always awesome to talk to you. Back when I, I'm a film producer, and back when I taught, you were kind enough to come in multiple times to the classes and present stuff as a producer, director, and editor. It's lots of fun. You were always like a favorite guest, so no pressure, but let's try to make this awesome.
No pressure. I don't know.
Well, for the sake
to an end. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. No pressure. Well, great on the Corona curve on this one. So for the sake of getting us going, why don't you tell us a bit about your brief background? Sort of give us the snapshot of from whence you came and what got you where you are.
Well, I am from Orlando, Florida originally, and I always had an interest in movies, horror movies, a lot of them kind of post-apocalyptic, so, yay for now.
Hashtag irony.
I know, it's sort of like, okay, everybody, we can stop the post-apocalyptic cosplay and go back to work, right? No.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I've seen this movie, guys. I've seen this movie, yeah.
It doesn't end well. Anyway, by the time it gets to Negan, we're all going to tune out. Anyway, I'm from Orlando. I had a real interest in monster movies and horror movies, and I always wanted to make them. And the first thing that I kind of got myself into was special effects makeup, and that was even in like middle and high school, I was into special effects makeup, and in college, a woman who I'd met at a local community theater, who you will know, Amanda Llewellyn, trained me to be her assistant, and I came with her to a movie being shot in Mobile, Alabama, called Raw Justice. It was released as Raw Justice with David Keith and Robert Hayes and Pamela Anderson and Stacy Keach, Charles Napier, a bunch of seasoned character actor types. And that was my first real movie. I was in film school. I was trying to learn how to make my own movies, but I also had years and years of makeup experience even then, and so I was trying to use that to kind of get some kind of foothold into a career or whatever. And that movie led to me working, I think it was 6 or 7 times on movies that David Pryor either directed himself or produced, and that was where I met you. And that whole time I wanted to be a makeup artist, and somewhere in there I worked on a movie that was not a David Pryor movie, and I saw what I would say is the most disconnected, uninvolved director I've ever seen in my life. And up until then I thought directors have some special something about them, and I realized no, it's more accessible and less accessible than I think. Like in this particular case, again, I'm not going to name the director,
sure,
but it was just somebody who didn't talk to the actors and kind of let the DP do their own thing, and I kind of watched him work and thought,
I could do that.
How does this guy?
I cannot do anything.
How does this guy put on two pants and put his pants on 2 legs every day and go into work and call himself a director? If he can do it, I can do it. It was
right.
maybe more of my my attitude, and I had done it already, and I had a huge amount of theater experience as well, and I directed theater. And around 1997, I quit being a makeup artist, and around that time too, I helped my friends out with their weird little movie that they were shooting in the woods in a very unconventional way, and as a production designer, which is something I really am not. And that movie was The Blair Witch Project, and it's like the one in a billion case of something stupid that you and your buddies made that kind of blew up.
Yep.
And I was the production designer. I also wrote a lot of the backstory, and I had moved to LA by the time that came out in '99. I had just moved to LA, and it opened doors for me and allowed me to get to direct probably a little bit earlier than if I didn't have that, trump card in my pocket at all times.
Right.
And so I've been mostly directing and also editing a lot since then. I got rid of my makeup kit many years ago. Don't do it anymore.
Okay.
I directed a feature for Warner Brothers about 11 years ago called, I hate the title so much, Alien Raiders. That was not the title when we were making it. My friend Bob DeRosa and I did a horror comedy web series that it's kind of an ongoing thing. We released a second season recently. The third season is up in the air, but it's called 20 Seconds to Live. I've done a lot of second unit directing. I've done that for Adam Green. If you're a horror fan, you'll know the Hatchet movies. I've worked for him. I worked for a guy named Toby Wilkins on a series called Chosen for Crackle, which is Sony. And I'm still, like, 15-year-old me would be so proud of all the horror stuff that I've done. And then probably the most recent larger project I did was a horror fiction podcast for Shudder, which is Shudder, if you're not familiar with it, is AMC Networks created basically an online streaming network that's basically Netflix, but all horror movies. Yeah. And about a year and a half ago, Bob and I, the two guys who do 20 Seconds to Live, were brought on by Mike Manello and Nick Bracchia, who had created this thing called Video Palace, and it's a horror fiction podcast that anyone who's listening to this can subscribe to right now and hear every episode of that. Also waiting on a possible second season. Always hopeful, but who knows.
Fantastic. And I will also prompt you again at the end of this for you to give me whatever links you'd like to include. But yeah, you have one of the most eclectic backgrounds of anyone I know, besides myself, minus the minus the cultural touchstone that everybody. Oh, you worked on that. Okay, but you've done so much more than, Blair Witch. I know it was an important launching pad, and then you've just done so much stuff and such a wide array of projects. And I sort of say this because, I know that there were certain things that because we've been friends a long time, I'll take the liberty of saying this instead of asking the question and drawing it out of you for 10 minutes. But
do it.
Bottom line is that I'm aware from all of our conversations over the years that, certain of those mockumentary, type of things, found footage, there are a lot of those offers came to you and a few, were involved, but that you've done so many other things. And so I'm glad that you're having, the Video Palace show, really great show. Tons of awesome reviews. Yeah, it's fantastic. And I'm not just being nice to my friend and guest, but great podcast, really well reviewed.
You could tell me if you hated it, and
sure,
I would roll with it.
You'd find a way to. Well, that's your choice. That's your choice. That's your privilege not to like it. But in terms of where we are right this second, let's do a little snapshot. We're both in the greater Los Angeles area. But of course, yes, we're speaking from our relative locations and recording, and we're seeing each other via Skype. But we're doing this because we have the SARS version 2.0 everywhere right now. What's your current situation as we sit here and talk?
Well, I'm home. I have a house that I've lived in since 2002. And in kind of a quiet suburban corner of LA, and we know our neighbors, and it's a pretty chill neighborhood. My wife Alicia and I had a son about 2 years ago, so we have a 2-year-old baby, not quite 2-year-old, and probably the ramp up to this was kind of insane because I actually remember we take him to this parent and toddler class on Fridays, and like 3 weeks ago. Nobody had heard of COVID, or maybe it's 4 weeks ago. Nobody had heard of it. Then 3 weeks ago, somebody was like, well, this is all just a plot for China to squash dissidents and, and hit me with this conspiracy theory. And then literally the following week, the same woman said like, oh man, my husband's nuts. He went to Costco and stocked up on ramen noodles and blah, blah, blah. This is not going to be a big deal. We're all going to be fine. Don't worry. It's just going to be like a really bad flu season, strap in, but you're going to be fine. And then the next week, the preschool was canceled.
Yeah.
And so Alicia, she works on House Hunters. You might see her directly behind me in the Skype window.
I do. Yes. Hi, Alicia.
She's
waving,
and they basically gave her computer and sent her home to finish the shows that they have yet to finish. I am pretty sure they've stopped shooting the show, so there's a finite amount of material for her to continue writing because she's a writer on House Hunters. Mm-hmm. Like basically everyone, no one's allowed to work in an office, but you can work from home. Telecommuting is fine, so a lot of people are working on the show from home. I'm in a weird position, in a good way at the moment because Bob and I, as a result of Video Palace, we got a deal with I won't say who it is because who knows what's going to happen, but a prominent audio production company to develop another horror project. It's not for Shudder this time, but it's for somebody that you've probably heard of,
right?
And it took 11 months for the deal to go through. And
what?
I kept waiting for it to stumble and fall every 5 minutes, and it didn't. And including like the executive who brought us in left the company, and you kind of go like, oh well, we're dead.
Yeah,
and
we're dead.
Kept going.
Huh?
The deal went through. So Bob and I are currently writing a horror audio project. That's completely unlike Video Palace. It's not a first-person investigative kind of a thing. It's basically an audio drama for a different place, and it's an original concept of ours. And so, like during this a plague season, I have to kind of turn that off, my worry about it, and sit down and do some writing. And we were gonna literally this week we were gonna do a table read. We were just gonna bring in a bunch of actor friends of ours and throw some scripts and snacks at them and read the whole thing. And of course now no one's allowed to leave their house, and Bob and I were like, well, we could just do a Zoom
or a Skype,
a Zoom meeting. So we're doing that. We're gonna do a virtual table read with some actor friends, just so we can hear it out loud. And in a weird way, I'm not saying that it's not. I would still rather be in the room with them, but it's actually kind of cool that we'll basically just be creating an audio artifact, so we can listen to it and be like, what dialogue isn't working and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And because this is going to guide our last rewrite before we turn it into the company we're working for. And so in a way that's exciting, and then in a way it's also sort of like my personal headspace is like every entertainment related thing just kind of suddenly feels really trivial because basic survival is becoming a little bit more important, and hoping that our society kind of stays in one piece somehow. Like you were saying before we started recording, there will be a new normal. We're going to land there. I remember after 9/11, being like you couldn't drive up to LAX if you were flying in or out of LA. And I was like, how long is this going to go on for?
Exactly.
And, at the time, people were like, oh, it's just going to be like this from now on. And of course it wasn't. It was like that for, maybe 6 months or a year. And now, of course, you can, when we don't have a plague going on, you can drive right up to your terminal, hop right out.
Sure.
So, but then there are certain things like having to take off your shoes and belts, which you didn't have to do before 9/11, which now you do.
Which you don't have to do anywhere else in the world I fly, by the way. So they've somehow mastered checking the shoes whilst them staying on your feet. Literally every other country I fly in and out of, but that's another story.
Well, yeah. Well, firstly that, and secondly, it's not like it's making anyone any safer. But I do wonder, what are the things that are legacies of this? If the big legacy is we all keep Purell by our sink and wash our hands 10 times more than we do, then that's probably not a bad thing. But if if we stop going to see movies in movie theaters, I think that would be a bummer. Like now a lot of the movies that are coming out, they're talking about having them available to just stream.
Right.
And that'll be cool for now. But, I don't want to see movie theaters close. I don't want to see, industries get shuttered. I don't want to see, all the restaurants and stuff get closed. And, it's sort of weird because literally, I can sometimes be a bit of a homebody, but like I usually will leave the house every day for something. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I, the only thing I've left the house for this week was to go buy groceries. Like literally that's it. And the grocery store is super weird. And, it's just all craziness.
Well, you mentioned a few things that are sort of all related to what I wanted to talk about. I mean, the impact on upcoming work and adaptations you're making, and your situation with your family. And so, Alicia's also, you're both working from the home office, for instance, and it's fortunate that your current project is something that you would be doing the creative work at home anyway. So that's that's nice. But what about other issues? I mean, I imagine a lot of the future conversations of things that might have been sort of in the pipeline are on pause, or did you have?
Sure. Well, no, it's not even like that. Like I'm not really a sound designer, but I still do a lot of theater. I've always done a lot of theater. And about 2 years ago, I did sound design for a play called The Art Couple at the small theater that I was a member at, Sacred Fools. And that show got picked up to be remounted at the Kirk Douglas Theater, which is a much bigger theater. And they brought the whole team, the same exact designers for everything. So this past weekend, as we're talking, about a week ago, we were supposed to do tech, basically load in, do Q to Q, do dry tech, do Q to Q, and get it up and running. And a few days ago was supposed to be the first preview of the show. And I had even gone so far as to have taken my design from the original show and brought it into the theater and loaded it in and heard it on their speakers, and had everything kind of like the Wednesday before the tech. I went over there and, worked for a few hours and just kind of got what I had already built.
Made it work for that space.
Because in theater and Q to Q, like everything is going to change once you start going. So you don't perfect it in your original project, but it's all kind of laid out there and ready to work with. Yeah. And so I'd already done that. And then a week ago today, the theater basically reached out and said, yeah, we're indefinitely postponing the play. We're just not we're not gonna be doing it anytime soon. And they canceled tech the day before it was supposed to happen. And so that was like a real job that I was hired to do, that I was ready to do, and it just went away. And I know that's, and in the theater world in LA, like that, so that theater is owned by Center Theater Group. They own the Mark Taper Forum and a bunch of other giant venues, and all their venues got shuttered. So anyone, and all the other theaters, including like the big ones like Pasadena Playhouse and the Geffen Playhouse and all that, they're all done. Like none of them are doing anything right now. Mm-hmm. And it's so like that cut off, and I can't really talk about like all the other projects that I had at whatever stage of development. None of them, I didn't have like a movie that was getting ready to shoot or anything, which would have been heartbreaking. And I know people who were in that situation where they were like, the thing they've been working on for years. Yeah, we got the green light, we're ready to go, we got the money in the bank, and then sad trombone music, and you just don't know if after the clouds clear on this, if the money will still be there to do these things. The financiers and stuff might be like, I remember some friends of mine had a movie that they were going to make that they had, it was significant financing. It was like $8 million in an escrow account. And then 9/11 happened. They were like ready to do it. And then 9/11 happened. And then all the investors pulled their money out. And also, I've probably told you the story, but before 9/11, myself and two other friends were pitching around a TV series based on the Centers for Disease Control. Yeah. And we sold it. And we had just gotten our first round of contracts when 9/11 happened. and we sold it to a company that I think is out of business now called Big Ticket TV. They were a great company, and like literally, a show about disease, which included heavy strains of bioterrorism in it.
Sure,
they were like right after 9/11. Nobody wanted nobody want yeah, and so like that just disappeared.
Yeah.
And so I kind of think that, like I know a lot of people kind of in the horror film world, and although I don't think horror is going anywhere, in fact, I think there's probably going to be more demand for that in entertainment, however, in whatever way it kind of manifests. I think that a lot of executives are going to get cold feet about content that might feel a little too real at the moment.
I totally agree with that. I've been thinking about that across certain genres, and without getting into the details of my story, I'll tell you more off mic. But we've been working on this feature film, and you edited the short film that we did on my favorite season, which was a lot of fun. And the feature has been financed, and then those investors had issues. They had internal problems. We've got it put back together with new people, but now we're waiting on money to sort of transfer. And then this happens. So, I mean, we're expecting to Larry and I are expecting to go to Paris in about a month to start our soft prep, and then be doing hard prep by mid-July to shoot in the fall. And so now this is like a constant conversation. I was on a 7-way group call last night, or 6-way group call with the other exec producers and the director, discussing all this, discussing the ramifications and contingencies. And the bottom line is that we're still moving forward. And I'm going to say a thing, and then I would like you to follow up with this and get your take on it. My feeling, and I've been talking to a lot of people in our industry and adjacent to it, entertainment being the industry, and my feeling before I even talked to anybody was sort of what I said, and you quoted me from the off mic, is there will be a new normal at some point. We'll be past this. Quarantines will have worked, containment will have worked, and it'll be okay to mix, and travel will open up, and it will be okay to travel to, say, a foreign country to do a job, or even to another state, or leave your home to do a job. But especially with international travel, I think there will be something like, okay, you can come now, but everybody has to quarantine for 2 weeks, in this hotel or here. And then as long as you check out,
give you a test. Maybe there's just a COVID-19 test they give you.
There'll be that as well. I'm just saying that, like, worst case is that we're shut down forever. That's not going to happen. But I think the least good option is things are going, but you still have these extra precautions where you have to sort of self-quarantine when you travel to a place, and then they check you again, and if you're still good, you can mix. But I feel like antiviral treatments. Everybody says a new vaccine with trials is a year to 18 months, but maybe they'll find something that they can repurpose that works. But bottom line is there will be some new normal where we're kind of going again. What are your thoughts / hopes about between now and then? What do you think as you look down the road about midway to that magic point where there's some sort of a solve or a fix or a cure or a treatment, and sort of getting back to something like normal?
Well, as I was saying, I had developed that TV series about the CDC, and I haven't been super current on my information about it since 9/11. So that's 20 years. I've sort of paid a little bit of attention, but in the process of doing that, I'd read a lot of books, and you can find this stuff out online very easily too. Is that it's going to take a year to 18 months because they just gave the first possible people the first human trials of a vaccine for COVID-19 last week, and they have to see what it does to them for a year before it can be approved. Because who knows? It could give you a stroke. It could give you internal hemorrhaging.
Exactly.
All kinds of things could happen. So it's going to be probably at least a year before we have a vaccine that we can trust. There is, kind of sunny optimism that as we get into the summer months, a lot of times these things wane. They don't thrive as well in the heat. So that's possible.
And then they maybe roar back in the cool weather.
In the fall.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm really answering your question, but to me, the answer of what needs to happen now, not that anyone cares what the production designer of Blair Witch Project thinks about the pandemic, but
you're so much more than that, Ben.
I am. But all of those things are not an epidemiologist.
Sure.
But I think that what we need is like an outrageous number of tests. Like if I could, I would test myself 3 times a week. I think that the problem is, and this was the problem in Italy, and they say Italy's about 2 weeks ahead of us, is we just have no real picture of how many people have it because there's been a dearth of tests. And some of that was just bureaucratic failure on the part, like the World Health Organization offered us apparently a bunch of them and the CDC rejected them and wanted to create their own. And so we could have had like a month-long head start on where we are now, and we chose not to do it. Now, maybe, 99 times out of 100, when the CDC does that to the World Health Organization, we don't hear about it because it's not newsworthy. It just happens to be newsworthy now. I sort of, I don't have a gut for this because I'm not an epidemiologist, but based on the stuff I know, I feel like we're probably in for living the lives that we're living right now, which is to say not very limited travel, like limited leaving the house, spending most of your time in the house, basically go to the grocery store, go to the pharmacy, go back home. We're probably 6 to 8 weeks minimum.
Yeah. I agree with that.
And here in California, we know for a fact it's 2 weeks. So 2 weeks from now, we're still all going to be in our homes. Again, we can go to the grocery store, we can go to the pharmacy. That's about it. We can also go outside and walk in parks and stuff, which will hopefully keep me from going insane. We have a friend of ours who kind of nannies for our son, and she's essentially moving in with us right now because she doesn't want to be going in and out, and so she's just going to basically sleep on our couch for probably at least a week. We'll see how it goes. She has a house not very far from here, and she has roommates moving out, so whatever. But I guess, to me, my concern place is because we don't have an accurate snapshot of what's happening right now, it's kind of impossible to project how long we have. Because, if our situation is exactly the same as Italy's, this is going to be really horrible. Like we're all on the Titanic.
Yeah.
Like we're going to run out of hospital beds. Yeah. And when I talk to my friends in Seattle, which is, where the first real outbreak in America was, they're already kind of there. Like, they're already kind of freaking out. And so until we have an accurate idea, which, right now, since in the absence of tests, where we're going to get the most accurate count we're going to get is by looking at the number of cases that are reported and confirmed.
Right.
So we're the tests. You could have it right now. I could have it. We're not showing symptoms, but we're spreading it to everyone we come in contact with. That is how it could be working. It's you're asymptomatic for the first 2 weeks when you have it, but contagious. Unlike something like, say, Ebola, for instance, which Ebola, like if you suspect you have Ebola, wait 2 days. If you didn't hemorrhage internally, then you didn't have Ebola.
Yeah.
And it's contagious, but it shows up so fast that it's easy to quarantine people. It's easy to figure out who's got it and get them out of circulation. With this, we just don't know. So, and I think that in particular is what's contributing to the rapid increase of it. So I feel like, when you say like when we're in the middle of this, between the wave that we're trying to prevent now and all of us going back to blithely eating at restaurants and putting our hands on tables without sanitizing anything, the weird utopian world we were all living in 3 weeks ago.
Right.
How long? I feel like we're going to weather a first wave of this, and a lot of us are going to get it, a lot of us aren't, and probably according to what's going on, it's mostly really older people or people with underlying conditions are going to die,
right,
or have serious complications. We don't know what's going to happen beyond that, and so it'll probably hit a wave and then go back. I mean, like I've looked at the reports where they kind of are talking about how that's going to happen. So are we? So the question is the quarantine going to be 2 weeks? Is it going to be 8 weeks? Is it going to be 18 months? You know, and 18 months sounds pretty catastrophic. So, you know, I'm crossing my fingers that at least 6 to 8 weeks from now we'll have an accurate enough idea of what to do about it, and also like there's not going to be a miraculous vaccine that anyone finds, but they are looking at other drugs that might help treat it.
Right.
And
right. So if you've got it, it can help you get better.
Yeah. And so, like, I think that, you know, those drugs do exist in abundance. So they're just testing those like crazy right now. And hopefully, you know, the best minds at the CDC and the World Health Organization and all of these various organizations are busily doing that. And, you know, it's a trivial question to ask, but like, then when we come out the other side of it, like culturally, what are we at that point? It's going to, you know, we all will have gone through something that's a lot like the influenza outbreak in 1918 or the Great Depression. And, you know, you and I are old enough to have gone through 9/11 and the recession 10 years ago. Not that you have to be that old to have done that, but you and I were both adults when 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
You know, all this right now feels a lot like the days after 9/11 where we were all scratching our heads going like, okay, so what is the world again? And what do we all do?
Yeah.
I feel like there's a little bit of that, like, you know, the stuff that I was really obsessed with and meant the world to me 6 weeks ago now kind of feels dated in a weird way, you know. And I think it's actually informing the thing that Bob and I are writing, because it wasn't intended to be a comment on this at all, but you know, it's a monster story. But like, I think as you know, because we started writing it before this all happened. But, you know, all of our revisions have been happening since then. And I feel like it's impossible for us to not infuse it with the anxiety that we both are having right now.
Well, that gets to something else I want to ask you about in terms of getting into the weeds a little bit. In terms of adaptations you're making, there's the personal stuff. And I was going to ask you how you're dealing with daycare. And you mentioned your nanny's going to move in with you for a bit, which it sounds like it will work for everyone. You know, so that you and Lisha can still do your stuff and the nanny can be safe and Madden can be safe, so you don't have somebody coming and going all the time to maybe bring him a present that he doesn't want to have. So in terms of the work, let's talk about that a minute, then we'll circle back around. We'll move into some political stuff after that. But in terms of the work, so you just indicated, so you guys are, as you're doing your revisions on this, would it release? I mean, I know there are a lot of moving parts and some you can't even talk about speculatively, but the point is, would this release probably before the all clear? Like, you guys do this, would it release, say, in the summer, or would it release after the fact?
No, there's no way, because we would have to produce it. We're just writing it now, so in order to produce it,
I just don't know how long your production cycle. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, like, I mean, I can tell you that, like, when we did Video Palace, okay, so this company, when they reached out to us initially, were asking about releasing it around Halloween.
Okay.
And this would have been last Halloween.
Oh, all right.
11 months to
do the deal.
Yeah. Well, there were a lot of steps in between, but yeah. So in the event that they wanted us to do this for this Halloween, I can only use Video Palace as kind of a salient example of how to do that, because that was what we did. So Video Palace, we started working on probably June. We wrote the script in May and June, but like my son had been born that May. We wrote the script, cast it, recorded it in mid-July, and had it all edited, and it's about 10 hours of stuff. Is that right? No. I take it all back. It's 10 episodes. It's about 3 hours worth of stuff. It was all done and delivered by the end of September.
Okay.
Or beginning of September. So it was all out the door in September. So because it's audio only, you can there are fewer hands everything needs to go through, and you can work a whole lot faster. You can record a lot faster. You know, like you and I are used to making movies where if you have an 8-page day, that's kind of a heavy day.
That's kind of a monster, yeah.
Yeah. When we were doing Video Palace, we were recording some days 45 pages, but like
Wow.
minimum of probably about 40 pages a day minimum.
Mm-hmm.
And because the way we did it is a lot like making a movie, except there are no props or costumes or makeup or lighting or lenses or cameras. It's just actors and dialogue. And so aside from minor resets for microphones between scenes, you would, read through it once and then you'd record it and, maybe do 4 or 5 takes.
Mm-hmm.
That's about as many as I generally have a stomach for. And then move on, and if you need to, if you can. And so we were able to move really, really fast. And we had an amazing producer. I think you know him. His name's Liam Finn.
Yeah, no, Liam.
And,
sure. We were all at Sundance one year together.
So Liam scheduled the whole thing, and really did a great job of breaking it down and kind of making it so that we could just crush through it. So this project is so far about 8 chapters long, and each one is probably between 20 and 30 pages. So it's probably roughly the same length as Video Palace.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like, and it's way fewer characters. So I feel like we can probably burn through it in a similar schedule at least. And then, post-production is where you end up spending a lot more time. But even with that, on Video Palace, it was maybe 3 to 4 days to get a first version of each episode. And then, I would give notes and the producers would give notes, and we'd, maybe go back and forth a few times. But, so if in order, this is a very long-winded answer to your question. In order for this to be finished by Halloween, we would have to be allowed to produce it by June or July, I think, and I'm sure that if they wanted to pull the trigger and do it, it's going to not be hard to find, post sound companies and actors and people who are
they're going to be available. Well, that was what I was wondering. I mean, my follow-up is sort of a two-parter, because logistically it seems like I'm interested in the adaptations that other people will have to make and adaptations I'm making. For instance, I mean, especially with the proliferation of high-quality microphones that don't cost, like a BMW payment or something, a lot of people, especially people who are actors or do professional voice work, they probably have a range of things. And a lot of them have a home studio. I guess it seems like with a combination of like directing by Zoom and somebody doing it in their room, like you could do it. It's not ideal. But I'm thinking, well, how do you actually proceed in a less than ideal circumstance and still hit the mark? Or do you just, do you feel like you have to wait till you get everybody in a studio?
I mean, casting would be tricky, I think. I'm about to hit you with my opinion about audio drama. There are some audio dramas, and I've only been there for the recording of mine, so I don't really know how they were all made. But probably my favorite one that's come out in the last several years is called Homecoming, and it was made for Gimlet. And it had Catherine Keener and Oscar Isaac and stuff, and it feels like you are a fly on the wall. You feel like you're in the room with these people, and I'm willing to bet money that they were all in the room together when they were recording.
Right.
And then I'm not going to name names of other ones, but there is another one that I have in my head right now that stars a very well-known performer who you would know. And to me, it reeked of having been recorded like a cartoon would be, where you bring in one actor and have them do all their lines, and have them do all their lines, and then they just cut it up in post. Yeah. And so no one really feels like they're interacting with anyone, and
because they're not
very mic'd. Yeah. When we were getting ready to do Video Palace, the company that was doing our post sound is my good friend Drew Dalzell has a company called Diablo Sound. They do like live event stuff, so they do like Halloween horror nights and stuff. And Drew was suggesting that we get everybody in isolation booths. And I was like, no. We're going to have them. We recorded basically in a Foley studio. Mm-hmm. And his point was a valid point, because
for the record, you're not torturing Madden. He's just excited about something in the background. Please keep going.
I'm not torturing him.
I just wanted to let people know since they can't see. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, Drew's thought was like, well, we can slide performances around if we have like absolute isolation. And I wanted it to have a very improvisational, spontaneous feel, even though it's all scripted. And to me, the way to get that is to have the actors in the room. So we recorded everything in a Foley studio, in a Foley stage.
Yeah.
And we actually gave the main character the exact device, Zoom H4n, that a podcaster would have, and had him pointing it around. And we also had them mic'd with a fancy boom mic, and they all had lav mics on them.
Right.
And then we ended up mostly using the $250 Zoom H4n audio for all the stuff that's supposed to sound like live audio. Because we wanted it to be, we wanted the perspective of, if I'm holding the microphone and pointing it in your face, I wanted to hear you clearer. And if I'm off mic, we hear a little echo or whatever.
You hear that person that's over here that's off mic, and it sounds like that instead of like right here. Yeah.
Exactly. So the project Bob and I are writing, like, we definitely have it in mind that if we were to make it, and it's not guaranteed that we get to make it, if they decide to do it, they could take it to someone else. But again, I've been told by them that one of the reasons that they're excited about the possibility of working with us is that we have the ability to produce it on our own.
Right.
Is I would want to have all the people in the room together if I could. If to me, like, the casting would be a little wambly. If you had to say, I'm restricted only to actors who have their own recording booths.
Sure,
even though that's a lot.
Yeah.
And even that, like, I'm looking at your mic and I'm looking at my mic. They're two different mics. I'm sure they sound fine for an interview, but for something, where
it needs
like
to match.
We're making them, and it's a horror story. It's a monster story. So it's probably better to have a professional whose only job is to record the audio, as you would well know.
Sure. That was my old job for people who don't know from years ago.
Yeah. When I met you, I was a makeup artist and you were a sound guy.
Yeah.
And
about 12 years.
And so to me, so to me, that would be how we would want to do it. And Bob and I have even been sort of kicking around the idea of, like, what if we came up, during the plague here, with like a short form project where we reached out to our actor friends who we know already have their own mics, and basically tailored it specifically to them, and then I cut it up and add sound and blah blah blah. And we might do something like that, for fun, because what else are we doing with our lives right now? But I don't think that I would. I don't know. I don't want to say never about anything, but I think it would be weird to do it that way. I'm open to whatever solution there is, but if the company that we're making it for insisted that was the only way we could do it, and we could get to make it that way, as then you sort of have a decision to make. Do I want to make it a way that isn't the way I want to do it, but we'll get it done, or whatever.
Exactly.
So, but I mean, like, I just don't know if anyone's going to be in production on anything until this cloud passes.
Well, this is the second part of the question specific to this project, but it relates to what you just were getting to moving on from there. In terms, so that's logistical considerations, which of course are creative as well. In terms of other creative considerations, what about, you mentioned, and I don't want to make you feel like you would have to, and you probably don't want to get into the IP in any meaningful way right now, but in terms of adjusting your story, adjusting the IP to acknowledge the world where coronavirus is a thing. So is this having a major impact on the story, or do you see it as sort of a minor thing that you, because of the nature of this, like, you establish it and it's maybe referenced if it's relevant in some way, but it's not, it doesn't does it fundamentally change the story or not for you? Not fundamental. I mean, well, in a weird way, just the way this stuff works is, so in order to get the contract, we pitched them a bunch of log lines. They liked this one. They asked us to expand it. And what they wanted was a series Bible, which is basically an episode by episode summary of everything that's going to happen in the whole season. And, stuff changes when you write it, but you sort of want to, gives them the roadmap.
Those are sort of, exactly.
Lets them know that you can actually go from 1 to 2 to 3, and it's got a thread. And
exactly. And then they also wanted, like, basically the first script. And they threw us a little bit of development money, to come up with all that stuff. So we did all that months and months ago. Like, I think we turned it in like June, and it took the summer to get and then they said they wanted to do it, and then it just took forever for contracts because you're working with a big company. So we're kind of executing the idea as was pitched. Currently, we have 0 references to coronavirus in the script because it's not really relevant to the story. And I also feel like if we were to insert something about coronavirus now, this is just sort of my gut reaction to that. If we were to make a reference to it right now, we don't know by the time we go into production how much it might really affect everything.
Right.
And, this is not going to happen, or I don't believe this is going to happen, although nothing would make me happier, is coronavirus could be like the Y2K bug, and it's like...
we're past... Yeah, we're well past that, I mean, my home and my office are in Beijing. I basically evacuated just ahead of it getting bad, self-quarantined 2.5 weeks at my mom's. I've been back 6 weeks. My girlfriend, all my friends and colleagues back in China, I talk to people daily. Yeah, I've seen this movie, and there are a few alternate endings, but I know the different ways this can go, and we're going to get into the political part about this, but unfortunately, we've got kind of we sort of drew the shit straw, the short shit straw in terms of endings here, but I sort of just jumped all over you. So you're not going to change your IP to try to toe a line.
The thing is, I think that if we were to do that, we would need to do it sort of again after we see what it does. Is it going to be something that where mostly old people die who had underlying health conditions, or are a lot of young people going to die? We don't know how it's going to react differently in our culture versus China versus Italy versus everywhere else, South Korea and other places it's already been. So I feel like it would be on our part irresponsible and a fool's errand to insert it, because I'm assuming if it gets made, it'll come out long after this is over, or at least after this is over. Even if it comes out in Halloween, hopefully by Halloween we will be living in some kind of middle ground between quarantined and completely free. So hopefully there will be plentiful tests, and we'll have a much clearer idea of who's got it and what's happening and when it spreads and blah blah blah. But I just think that to insert it, imagine if on the 12th of September 2001 you inserted 9/11 stuff into your script, and you had no idea that it was going to cause a war in Iraq, and that it was that all the stuff that happened as a result of 9/11 was we just don't know what kind of shape the culture is going to be in when this is all over.
Yeah. Well, let me run this by you. Actually, I'm going to kind of stress test this, get your hot take on it, because there's this thing that I've been writing, a TV pilot that I created years ago. I had a specific idea, and a few things that came together as one semi-coherent idea, and developed it. I don't have a track record as a creator and showrunner in television, and that's one of the hardest things. It used to be one of the hardest things to get a deal. Now with Netflix and all the streamers, it's a little bit easier to get a deal. It's possible. Anyway, I spent a lot of time working on this between other projects. Ended up thinking, I got a little pessimistic about it as about my ability to do a TV show, say 3.5 years ago. And also there were some things with the creative that I'd sort of outgrown some of the ideas and themes that were big in it. And then so what I did was I rewrote it as an indie feature, because me, and that's kind of what I've done is I've produced a lot of indie features, or been a producer on a bunch of indie features, and I've I knew I could produce a relatively low budget indie feature, and okay, well, this is a way to ensure that I'm in the driver's seat. And I didn't hate what I came up with, but I said, you know what, damn it, this is a series. I created these characters and I set up this world. This is meant to be an ongoing thing. There's 3, 4, 5 seasons of story here done properly. Yeah. So I went back to the drawing board. I mapped it all out from scratch, and I opened up a clean document and started writing. And then I pulled things from the old draft that were good and rewrote them. So cut to, I was almost finished with it. Almost finished with the rewrite. And I won't say the management firm or the agency, but I have friends at the China side outpost of two of the biggest ones, respectively, who, fortunately we have a great relationship. They know me. They know the other stuff I've done. I've done a lot of China side projects that people here have never heard of. So I have a little bit of a track record there, which is nice. And this is totally for the Western world. And I'm getting to the question. This is the necessary setup. But the point is that I have two different, fairly high-powered reps who want to work with me on this. And the manager, has already said, essentially, she wants to take me when I have the script and the Bible where I'm happy with it. I mean, as long as those satisfy her like the pitch did, they want to sign me and take me to, the streamers, Netflix, etc. So that's all great. Cool. So I have motivation to do that, and besides my own internal. But here's the point: is that there is a China-related angle in this. It's a Western set thing, and it's very much for Western audiences. If it went to series, season 2 will probably get my visa lit on fire. I mean, I'm not China bashing, but I'm getting into some real stuff, So my point is that I realized, because of the nature of some of the creative, I had to consider, what's this new normal going to be like? That's actually part of my reason for doing this podcast. So I've had to consider, what's this world like as relates to, at least to my story. And so I'm setting it in a world, because my guys and gals, my core group has to travel to China to do some business, and that's the end of the pilot, is that they're on a plane and they're going to China. And so the how is that possible was something I had to confront, and what I came up with was, it's set in a world where basically we've had a vaccine for about 4 months. Worldwide, people have got them, and you get a certificate. You have a digital certificate that it's like a blockchain thing that proves, yes, I'm vaccinated. I can travel. So it's not a big thing. I'm not making a big thing about the virus, but I'm addressing it early because, assuming that networks are still reading stuff, it'll be 4 to 6 weeks when this is finally landing someplace to be considered. So I'm trying to be smart and be ahead of it. But what do you think of that? I mean, that's sort of reality where, assume at some point there will be a vaccine. Assume that it will be basically smart or mandatory or both for every responsible grown-up to have it, and that actually that's a condition, just like, okay, you want to travel to here, okay, you got your passport and your visa and your vaccine certification. So I'm just sort of assuming that's the reality, and I think that's going to hold up. It's something that's important, because before I undertook this polish with that in mind, there are a lot of things that aren't going to be possible the same way. You know, in terms of just, travel, certain travel things, especially.
As far as it relates to like the story we're telling, which is all in like one small town, kind of a not backwards, but kind of a backwoods, drive through.
Sort of isolated sort of place.
Yeah. So like for those people, I feel like if it became necessary to make a couple of references, then it might be viable. I feel like it puts a big ass date stamp on your project, whatever it is.
Right.
That being said, it sounds like you're kind of playing in the realm of mildly speculative fiction. So you're kind of jumping past the thing, which is actually very optimistic and warms my heart to hear you talk about it. Like, oh yeah,
I might have to date it 2022, but that's another story.
Yeah, I know, because I'm like, when I heard a couple days ago that it's like, it's possible we're all locked in our houses for 18 months, I'm like, oh, so I'll be emerging into the world, 50 years old. That'll be weird. But no, I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea at all. I think it's a really cool idea. It's just I think that your story kind of relates to the people for whom that would actually have an impact, and I feel like the story that we're telling,
it's not really a factor.
I also I have an aversion myself to time stamping stuff too much.
Right.
And whenever I do it, it kind of bites me in the ass. I did a short film a few years ago that had a joke about the Cubs winning the World Series in 2058 or something like that. And then they won the World Series. And I was like, thanks Cubs for screwing up this throwaway joke in my short film.
I remember that joke in that film. Good film. Pissed. Good film, but it's like, okay. That was that was a
all my
safe joke
Chicago
when you
friends
wrote
hated
it.
Yeah.
That was a safe
All
enough
my
joke when you
Chicago
wrote
friends, it totally was. All my Chicago friends were pissed off at me because I was like, I don't give a shit about sports at
Right.
all. And yet there I was rooting against the Cubs in the World Series because I'm like, you're going to ruin my short film, you assholes. You're not really ruining the short film, but you're
messing up my joke. Don't mess up my
yeah.
gag.
I mean, like we did in Video Palace, those characters are very current kind of people, and we were doing it. It was maybe a few months after that whole weird internet debate about that audio clips. Did you hear Laurel or Yanny? And we made like one passing reference to that. That's about as current as we got with that.
Yeah.
You know, we mentioned real movies that existed, but they were all like old VHS movies from like the the dawn of time.
Yeah, they're sort of references. They're classic references. They're not contemporary.
I got a David Pryor reference in there, by the way.
You did?
One of the movies that he collected.
I heard
was
several
Deadly
episodes
Prey.
of that, but I haven't heard the entire series. Busy
Yeah,
living living my best life. Sorry, but you name check David Pryor? He's the director where Ben and I met.
I name checked one of his movies. I name checked Deadly Prey, which is probably his best movie.
Oh, okay. Which one was that? Who's in that? Do you remember?
Oh, Ted. It's basically an adaptation of The Most Dangerous Game, and Ted is being hunted, and it's the most macho Rambo murder spree kind of. It's so murderous.
I don't
it's
know
so
if
filled with murder.
I remember Ted very well from back in the day, and we won't go down a rabbit hole because haven't talked to him in decades, literally. But he was sort of if David Pryor was sort of the poor man's Michael Bay, I guess Ted would be sort of the poor man's Jean-Claude Van
David
Damme
Carradine.
or something like that.
Well, he was his brother, and he was like Ted was a bodybuilder, and he looked good on camera, and he was in a lot of his movies.
Great-looking guy, bodybuilder, you know.
Yeah.
No, I thought Ted was fine. I'm not impugning his
Yeah.
ability, just that kind of his motif was that macho action leading man kind of guy.
Oh, for sure. Well, that's what David did. I mean, like I feel like if you look at movies like Predator and Aliens and First Blood. Every movie David made was an attempt at remaking some aspects of those. I mean, he had other influences because the guy made like 30 movies in his life, or over 30 movies.
Right.
Unfortunately, he passed away about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah. I worked with him a few times, and you worked with him quite a few more than I did. But let's, as we sort of get into the home stretch here, I would be remiss if I did not ask you, two last things specifically. First of all, what do you think? I know you're not a prayer, a hoper. I'll use that colloquially, but you probably have hopes.
I think that you can hope for things.
I think you can hope for things. What are
aspiration is fine.
Nice. What do you think? Hope that the political impact of this will be here in the States. And if you have thoughts about the bigger world, God knows I got probably more than enough because of my weird life. But what are your thoughts about how this has been handled in the States? And I certainly will engage after you tell me your opinion. And then what do you think is sort of what's next? What do you see as the potential outcomes, the impact of this on our next presidency, et cetera?
I feel like this has been fumbled out of the gate and then like repeatedly spiked in the fumble zone. I'm not a sports guy,
but that fits though. That's a good use for a non-football guy. That's a good use of the metaphor. Yeah,
it's been a godforsaken mess. Like I said earlier, the World Health Organization had offered the CDC a vaccine, which they had turned down because they were not a vaccine. Excuse me. I take that back. Edit that out. They had offered us a test for the disease that the World Health Organization already had created, and the CDC turned it down because they were designing their own test, and then when they did, it didn't work.
Right.
And sorry, my son is having a meltdown in the next room. And so that was the first colossal screw up. The second colossal screw up was. I think it's this. I don't mean to get horribly political, but you asked me a political question.
Yeah,
and
go for it.
Full disclosure: I would consider myself a liberal, but I'm not like I'm not an uncritical thinking liberal who just like says like excuse me.
Yeah,
legs asleep. I don't like to think of myself anyway as an uncritical thinking person who's like, yeah, whatever the liberals are saying, like I'm just gonna go to Radio Free Hillary Clinton and write down all my opinions.
Sure.
I like to pay attention, and I think that when my side is winning and screwing things up, I like to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
I feel like the knee-jerk instinct of the Republicans in America has been to, kind of quote-unquote own the libs by, whatever it is we're advocating, they advocate the opposite. So we're saying we need to quarantine people or at least, get social distancing and all that stuff. And Kid Rock is like, I have a honky-tonk, come on in. And I feel like it's exposing kind of an endemic stupidity that's just kind of floating underneath the surface of a lot of people. And I also feel like, everything has been so polarizing politically here, really, probably since Obama became president. I'm a huge Obama supporter, but certainly
Likewise.
Trump getting elected, Trump turned up the volume on that crap. And in fact, I feel like he revels in it because it makes him the story all the time. So when you think about all the scandals of the Trump administration, it's, the Mueller report, it's the impeachment, it's all about him, it's about Paul Manafort. So it's about his campaign manager, or it's about Roger Stone, his advisor. And this is like the first real test of his presidency that he has, it's not coming from him. He's not in control of it.
Yeah.
He can't go out and dismiss it. It's not a political argument that you can win rhetorically.
Yeah.
Like, you win this by not dying and by stopping a pandemic.
Yeah.
And, we all know that one of the things he did when he went into office was just dismantle the structures of government, or as he calls it, the deep state. He doesn't want anyone who's like competent at their job and has been doing it in government for any period of time. And I forget the name of the actual position. I should look it up before I say this to you, but I'm not going to.
The pandemic office, or?
Well, he closed that, but there was also a diplomatic position that was like a cabinet level position that was purely diplomatic. So when a pandemic pops up in, Liberia or, wherever, that person's job is to sort of have diplomatic relations with that country and go talk to them. So at the first mention of coronavirus in Wuhan, that person should have been talking to their counterpart in China and going over there and helping to figure out what was going on and making sure that we were getting good communication over here and all that good stuff. He never appointed anyone in that job.
Yeah.
So there's nobody doing that job. And then he got rid of as you said, the epidemic task force or a pandemic task force. Who, because they were spending like $250 million a year, and he was saying like, hey, what are we spending $250 a year on something that doesn't happen very often? And then, of course, it's like, I'm sure that if it would only cost $250 million to make this problem go away, they would all do it in 2 seconds.
Yeah. Well, yeah, now, we've already got a $1 trillion impacts probably coming globally, so that would have been a bargain.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, in all of those ways, like, I don't want to be so bold as to say this is what brings down the Trump presidency, because no degree of factual anything has stopped has even slowed the roll of these people who, in my opinion, are not principled people. And like, there are plenty of conservatives who I disagree with philosophically who are deeply principled. I mean, honestly, I hate, you and I, I'm sure, have talked about it. The George W. Bush administration was not one I supported.
Of course.
But at no point, never did I think, oh, George W. Bush is in this for himself and he doesn't care about the country.
Right.
But I do feel like Donald Trump is kind of figured out a way. There's something in the human character that I find more disturbing than, I find Donald Trump very disturbing, but there's something in the human character in some people that apparently craves a dictator. They want a dictator. They want a strong man to come in and be like, rah, rah, rah.
They want a big daddy to tell them what they can and can't do and where to go and how to jump. And
and I'm way more of wanting somebody like Obama who is thoughtful and considered and deliberate. Like, I feel like deliberate is a good quality in a leader when you're leading 350 million
a diverse nation of multiple interests and points of view. And
Somebody
Yeah.
who's like willing to acknowledge that like not everyone agrees with them, and
Yeah.
and not everyone is ever going to agree with them, no matter how many facts they have. And I feel like I'm constantly fighting these arguments with people, like I'm sure you've seen me complaining millions of times on Facebook about anti-vax people who think that vaccines give their kids autism and blah blah blah, and it's like this shit is just so deeply frustrating to me to see people just make a decision to turn their back on facts. And what's happened in America for the last 3 years is basically like we can't all even agree on what a fact is or what a reliable source is. So, if I bring up something as dry and stale sounding to me as CBS News, somebody on the other side will scream fake news and shut the door in my face.
Which is totally insane.
Yeah. I mean, like, look, when Fox News gets it right, I'm not afraid to... I'm not like, oh, it's Fox News, therefore it's fake news. Even though
I'll reshare their clip if it's a good clip or a good point or something.
Yeah, and I feel like there are places like Breitbart and whatnot on the internet that kind of revel in just pissing people like you and me off. So they just make more and more outrageous claims, more and more outrageously, until we get all in a tizzy. And the thing is that the outrageous claims that are being made now aren't like about future legislation, for healthcare or a woman's right to choose, or they're not philosophical in
taking
any way.
taking away guns from unborn babies or something.
Yeah, exactly. So like a bunch of fucking asshats who decide that they're going to have their spring break no matter what. Those people could be spreading a disease that ends up killing you or me.
Yeah.
Or their parents or
their
them
grandparents
or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, most likely the older people, but I'm a type 2 diabetic, so I'm actually I'm in elevated risk.
Okay.
I'm not super diabetic. I'm not like I'm very under control, but stuff like that, like it's going to come back and haunt me, and this has been my frustration, honestly, with the anti-vaxxers, and a lot of anti-vaxxers are super liberal people.
Sure.
But it's a certain kind of science denial that we've been living in. And now it's like, well, you can deny this virus all day long, but when the hospital's full of dead people, you can't deny shit. And we really could get to that point. If we're on the same trajectory as Italy, we could get there in a matter of weeks.
Yeah, we're pretty screwed if that's the case.
And that's terrifying. And, Italy, they say it's like higher population density and older population per capita and more higher incidence of smoking than we have. So, like, yes, there are demographic things that make us different than China or South Korea or Italy or France or anywhere else this crap has landed. But we're also human beings. And even like my super, super crazy liberal dad, like a week and a half ago, I was talking to him on the phone and he was talking about going out to dinner. And I'm like, why are you going out to dinner, you crazy person? Don't go to public, like eat at home. He's like, well, I'm not in jail. And I'm like, you kind of are.
Yeah, you should be. He was like, well, you should be.
And he said, next thing you're going to say, I shouldn't go to the gym. And I'm like, yes, actually, come to think of it, I am saying you should not go to the gym. Maybe there are exercises you can do at home.
Yes, exactly.
Like
breathing in and out, unassisted. Try that.
Yeah, for real.
Enjoy that while you can.
He's 85 years old.
Okay.
And I feel like, again, like very liberal, but also very new agey. And he was like, I am determined to live. He actually said that one point. He's like, this won't kill me because I'm determined to live. And I'm like, the Tony Robbins shit is not going to save you here. Like, that's not going to save you. The fact that you got a flu vaccine is not going to save you. The fact that you think you have a strong immune system because you have a good diet is not going to save you.
Yeah.
It's like you have Norton antivirus scan from 1998 and we have a new computer and there's a new virus and your body is not ready for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to me, as you can tell, I have a lot of opinions about this.
Sure. That's why I want to get you in front of the mic.
Yeah. I don't have a PhD in the shit. I mean, like, when you talk about the new normal, like, I like to remind myself that, we had the biggest pandemic that's ever hit this country in 1918, and it was horrible. It was way worse than what this is projected to be, and it took people out in the prime of their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we didn't have respirators, and we didn't have a lot of the technology that could be used today to keep people alive. And that was 1918, and after that, society bounced back. and we had it bounced back so well that we had a stock market collapse 10 years later because people were over investing in the stock market and speculating. So it's like, between 1918 and 1929, society picked back up. I mean, I don't know exactly when, but I'm assuming probably between 1918 and 1920 it was up and running again.
Yeah.
So I feel like, and I keep hearing people talk about 1918. I did a lot of research into the 1918 influenza outbreak when we were developing that CDC show. It was a horror that we couldn't fathom, but every epidemiologist on earth was saying, yeah, we're just waiting for the next one of those. Like, it could happen any year. And they're always, like when Richard Preston wrote The Hot Zone, there was all these fears about, like, could Ebola get to America, blah, blah, blah. And every epidemiologist would say, the thing you need to be afraid of is influenza. Like, it's not the big exotic bug. It's the thing that's already there. And coronavirus isn't influenza. They're different, but coronavirus is something that we've all had a coronavirus before.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to show you this, and then I'll say what it is for the sake of the audio-only listener. But I bought this a while back, and I've been reading in pieces, but I've been busy. And so I decided to start rereading to pick this up, Homo Deus, because a big part of what he talks about is how a bug is going to decimate. This is one of the future things on the horizon to look at. And he's saying, within 10, 15 years, there will be something that comes along that, is this kind of fits the profile. I mean, he's speculating about something that's even faster and more vicious and more deadly. But the basic idea, I mean, reading Homo Deus and along with everything else that we consume or that I've read in the past or watched, it's going to have a major impact. And I won't go on a big tangent about this, but I ask you the question about political impact because, this is what I'm seeing in the States is that some of, again, even Trump, like everyone commented on how much his tone changed all of a sudden one day. It's like one day he got up there and it was actually very minimal bullshit. It was pretty much facts. And
the bullshit's back though. Did you see? Like literally today, as we're recording, he yelled at a reporter for asking how he could assure people that they're going to be okay.
Well, be that as it may, yes. My point is simply that there was a moment where it even broke through that veneer. His alternate reality world that he lives in. And as I said at the beginning of this conversation, I sort of narrowly made it out of China before it got too bad, and I've been following this very intently. I've been through a quarantine of my own here. I know the ways this movie can go, and it's interesting in China how, among other things, there are a lot of like local and regional people who didn't take it seriously or act fast enough, whose heads are rolling, and some of them are scapegoats, and some of them are the goat who should have their head rolled. But this is actually, China Watcher people who know more than I do and are longer engaged than I do. People are saying, this is the biggest threat to President Xi Jinping's authority because he essentially took on more power than anyone since Mao. Since the emperors. Now he actually has more power and has created or taken on new roles that previous leaders hadn't taken. So basically, he owns it, for better, for worse. He owns it. He owns the response. He owns the reaction. He owns the effects.
All he has to do is take a cue from Donald Trump and not own it. To me,
it's
that's
too late for that. Too late for that.
Donald Trump, taking literally no responsibility for what happened when, again, he's not responsible for the disease existing, but it wouldn't be where it is if competent people were in charge. And in fact, David Frum, no one more conservative on earth, David Frum, who was a speechwriter for George W. Bush, who coined the term "axis of evil," wrote an essay for, I think it was The Atlantic, where he was basically saying more people are going to die because he is in power. More people are going to lose their life savings because he's in power. like because he's in power, and from wrote a book called Trumpocracy and is a super anti-Trump conservative.
Sure.
But I think if you are a principled conservative and
i.e.
believe in
a smart one,
principles, you don't want someone coming in who doesn't represent your values, who then stands for you.
Exactly.
Which is what is if you're a conservative, I think Trump is a terrible pox, because you're assuming that the whole country has to go your way basically indefinitely with a guy who's 73 years old and eats KFC 3 times a day. Like, when Trump is gone, which will be one day, there isn't another person. Like Mike Pence can't step in and be Trump again. Like nobody's going to be able to do this. And so everyone's going to be left holding his bag one day. So if he ends up being voted out of office this year, or ends up being voted out of office in 5, or doesn't get voted out, but he gets, if God forbid he gets a second term, then at the end of that term, who takes over? Like nobody. There are people who have the odious belief systems, but they lack the followership. Like Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, these kinds of people.
Sure,
like they're not,
sure.
So anyway, as far as the Chinese thing goes, I mean, to me, the most disturbing trend I've seen worldwide, it's not just here, is like strongmen being put in power in country after country. It happened in Brazil. It happened in the Philippines. Like one after another. And so to me, like, that's the real problem, is that people around the world want some kind of weird populist strongman to be in charge of their country. They don't want someone who's considered and thoughtful and democratic.
Yeah.
Someone who's considering the population. It's more someone who kind of, puffs their chest out like Mussolini or General Franco, and yells at people and orders people around, and even in the case of those people, I think these strongmen types are operating with less information. Like they're not curious.
Yeah.
I can't speak to all of them because I haven't like done a deep dive into each one of them, but certainly Trump doesn't know what he doesn't know. He's like a walking Dunning-Kruger effect.
Sure. I call him President Dunning-Kruger. So
it's like
inner monologue.
When he goes to the CDC and says a lot of people are telling me that I have a natural inclination for this. It's like
no one's telling you that. Yeah, no one's saying that because it's not true and no one's thinking it, and they're thinking the opposite.
But it's frustrating because
President Gaslight basically.
Yeah, we're all being gaslit. I don't know what the past tense of gaslight is, but that's what's happening to us. Because I have to admit to myself too, sometimes I'm like, am I just crazy and I don't see the world this way? Because I know that like I have relatives and good friends who are pro-Trump.
We're from the South. We know a lot of people who are conservative and not a fan. We know people who are a fan. Yeah, that's quite a few people. I had somebody recorded for a show that hasn't come out yet the other day, and he's actually a right-wing media guy. He's smart in other ways, but that's an area where we really get into it.
Oof. Yeah. The problem is if you can't argue with facts. So like, somebody posted a super pro-Trump thing on somebody's Facebook feed that was like easily disproved by going to Snopes.
Sure.
And so I posted the Snopes article, and Snopes is like very well researched and says where all the ideas come from. So I posted this thinking like that's the end of it. And actually that was just the beginning, because that person responded, "Oh, George Soros owns Snopes, and you expect me to believe that liberal blah, 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 fake news, fake news, fake news." And I'm like, okay, you could look at the sourcing of it, or you could just decry a bunch of crap that somebody told you on, Breitbart or InfoWars or something.
4chan.
But the fact that we're like living in a world where everyone gets their own facts, I feel like the coronavirus, if nothing else, is going to end up being the thing that gives us all at least one. It's going to give us the one measure by which we can measure facts. Like we can't argue with it. It's not going to take you out because you're conservative or liberal.
Right.
It's not going to agree with the president or disagree with the president. It's just going to be a virus. And you can't really argue with it. And maybe 100 years from now, people will have goofwad conspiracy theories about it. I'm sure people have goofwad conspiracy theories about it now. I'm sure that there will be an anti-vax movement against the coronavirus one day. And when I'm talking to anti-vaxxers, as I tend to not do anymore, a lot of, or well, I'll talk to them because they're people, but I don't talk to them about that belief system, is like, they can say, well, we've never seen this. Yeah, we've never lived in a world where people died of measles or mumps or rubella or polio or any of these things, because 50 years ago, whenever each vaccine came about, they figured out a way to make it so that we don't get it.
Yeah.
And, and people come back around, and like there was some Australian woman who wrote a book called Melanie's Marvelous Measles, and it was a book about how great it was for kids to get measles.
Huh.
And it's like, hey, stupid.
Sort of the herd immunity idea of like get a little case and fight it off, and then you're stronger. Is that sort of the faulty premise?
I mean, that's not herd immunity would be vaccine, but it's the idea of like you're going to get a natural immunization once you get the real measles. And I'm like, or counter pitch, I could not get the measles and get the identical immunity.
Yeah. I like that idea. That's fortunately that's the one my mom chose. And
get the same immunity. Like it's not like my immunity for getting the vaccine is worse than your immunity for having actually had the measles. Yeah. But there's rampant beliefs about that. So but I feel like when it sucks to me that the only thing that's going to get through to people is when they need to go to their local hospital because they broke their arm, but there is no one to help them because there's a line out the door of bodies on stretchers. That's the only thing that's going to get through to people, and then they'll tell their kids, and then their kids will be like, yeah, some bullshit happened in 2020, but we're all better now.
Well, last question, and it's a short one, and
all right.
Perhaps opportunity for you can take 5 minutes or take 5 seconds, but what's the upside, if any? Find the upside. I'm going to be asking people this. In spite of all this, what's some silver lining, unexpected benefit? What's something positive you can see coming out of this at the end of this? I would assume it could happen during, but I'm assuming once the dust is settled.
I think you actually kind of hit on something that I think is going to be an upside for creative people, is that we're going to find ways to create creative outlets that are going to resonate with people in different ways than than the dream that you and I have both had forever of like, I'm going to go make a movie and then that movie's going to get released and people are going to love it. Well, luckily with the internet we have things like podcasts and whatnot, and there are ways to create stuff remotely, and I think that an upside will be, I guarantee you some new voices who wouldn't have been heard are going to be heard coming out of that, the way that they are out of YouTube and the way they are out of regular old podcasts and stuff like that. I actually think I touched on an unfortunate upside, but it's still an upside, which is like, I think people are going to have to pay a little more attention to science. And I don't expect that to stay forever, but I'm hoping that in the short term, maybe the next 10, 15 years, when our science educators out there say something kind of obvious about these things, we don't get the Kid Rocks of the world screaming fake news in our face all day long. I also, personally think we're going to get a lot done here at the house. We're going to clean the house up a lot. I think, people are going to be a little bit more introspective and kind of go through their lives. And also, no drama doesn't come out of conflict. I mean, how many stories do you think are going to be told about this period of time in years to come?
Right. Yeah, totally. And the thing I'm working on, I don't want it to be about this. I just want a passing reference. But I think there's going to be a lot of things that are looking under the hood of this, and I'm probably not super interested in all that at a certain point. I'll be interested in the science
right
story,
now we're living through
but the human failings story, it's like we already see some of those. The guys in Wuhan who decided they couldn't risk losing face, and so they didn't cancel the 40,000 family potluck dinner, in Wuhan after they knew what they had on their hands, and then 5 million people left before the lockdown.
That was. I didn't realize that the mayor from Jaws had moved to Wuhan province.
Yeah, it's pretty much. What about the summer? Yeah.
I also feel like the current Republican institution as it stands, I see they tend to look at the world in two dimensions. One dimension is religiously, and I think often quite cynically so. Like, I think that they're using religious people to their benefit. Like Trump obviously could give a crap about anything religious, but he wants the evangelicals behind him and has somehow convinced them that he's King Cyrus or whatever.
I'm not religious at all, but few things make me, and I don't get angry easy. I get irritated.
I do.
But I know this is where we're different. That's why I'm name checking it. But few things make me as livid as seeing him in those prayer breakfasts and with the people who I probably don't agree with a lot of their views, but it's like often it's a lot of really sincere, good-hearted people, and it's like he's just playing them, or they're going along with it because he's the but just seeing him adopting the pious tone, I can't take it.
He surrounds himself with a bunch of like creepy prosperity gospel kind of
sure. Yeah. That lady who's his spiritual advisor is she's sort of almost like Andrew Vu. Come to my seminar. Real estate.
So the other dimension, totally. But the other dimension that I think they all see this in is financially, and there are so many other dimensions to a country, there, and I as an avowed atheist, I still recognize the fact that religion is an important dimension for a lot of people. So I'm not like trying to downplay that is important, but there's also culturally, there's also scientifically, there's like a gazillion directions. But I feel like this current wave of conservatism, and I don't know how far it goes outside of our country, but they just don't care about anything that isn't money or religion. Those are the only two things that they care about because that's how they get power. And I'm hoping that we get more conservatives in the George Will, David Frum, William F. Buckley mold, where they actually, I'm not going to agree with them any more than I do now, but at least you could have a debate with those people and
thoughtful, principled.
Yeah. Exactly. They've had their ideas come from somewhere.
Yeah.
They aren't just like XYZ equals power.
Right.
They come from somewhere. And I'm sure that there, if I was to sit down with Ted Cruz, which I would never do under any circumstances, but if I were to, I'm sure that's not that simplistic for him.
Sure. Sure. I imagine so.
But or Marco Rubio or, Susan Collins.
What do they say? Even Hitler had a dog. I mean.
Yeah.
Sorry, too soon?
Totally. Well, no. The guy who created Godwin's Law, is it Godwin's Law, the one that where you're not supposed to compare anyone to Hitler and the argument's immediately over?
Yeah, something like that. But if I can't name check the reference.
So that person basically repealed that for Trump. Like the person who invented the law basically said, no, go ahead and compare him to Hitler.
Yeah. No, I don't say that casually, but yeah. Your point is you could find somebody like Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio has some internal framework that drives their decisions, as baffling as they may be to some of us who don't agree with them.
Well, yeah, but they've chosen willfully to it's like a Faustian bargain that they've just sold it all out to. Yeah. And I hope that I would like to return to principled arguments with my conservative friends where we walk away not agreeing with each other, but understanding a point of view that isn't ours, as opposed to being being the libtards that they're owning by infuriating us with racism. And you see the Trump administration today even actively the last couple of days referring to
Chinese flu, Wuhan flu. Yeah.
They call it that, and they called it to one reporter's face. They referred to it as the Kung flu.
Right.
And it's like what they're trying to do is they're trying to get people like us to get all pissed off because they're a bunch of racists. And I think at this point, none of us are surprised. We're all like, oh yeah, you guys are a bunch of garbage racist people. And so when you say something like that, I'm just not going to take the bait. Okay. Okay, grandpas, call it whatever you want to call it. But do something, do the right things. And I have no confidence in the Trump administration to do the right thing if ever given an easier way out of something.
Right.
So right now there is no easy way out. So hopefully they're cornered and have to do the right thing. But Yeah. So as far as good things that come out of it, hopefully we'll get not garbage conservatives out of it. Maybe we'll run a lot of these bums out of office, and there will be a period of time until Republicans start taking over giant leadership positions again. And when they do, they won't be people like Mitch McConnell.
Yeah,
that's my hope. But I also am I call all of these wrong, so I wouldn't take my word on any of it.
Well, Ben,
I'm terrible at predicting.
I like where your head's at. Like you, I'm not. I don't have any magic crystal ball myself, but I like that idea. I like that upside. I'm going to start as I do these, and as I especially ask that question. I think I'm going to. I'll make a mental list for now because that's the first one. But I'm going to start sort of tracking these and sort of seeing, okay, how does it shake out? How does it shake out down the road? But thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I really appreciate it, and hope you all stay safe and sane and healthy up there.
Yeah, absolutely. You too. Yeah, it feels like you're 1,000 miles away, but if I were to get in my car and drive to where you are, I'd be there in 15 minutes because there's no traffic in LA at the moment.
Yeah, a bird could fly over Runyon Canyon. A bird could fly in maybe 5 minutes from where I'm sitting to where you're sitting. but we're separated. But thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, man. I'll talk to you later.